Deborah Messing. I saw a Deborah Messing picture.
No, I went to the Jenkintown thing. Deborah Messing was there.
And Jonathan Goldstein, who is an attorney who represents many. I'm not going to get this right. Go ahead.
So I regularly represent the National Rifle Association in Pennsylvania on a variety of matters. I'm quite steeped in gun law. I must say very clearly, I'm here in my individual capacity today. I'm not here on behalf of NRA, but I know them pretty well. I sit on a couple of committees in the NRA's board.
We're going to attempt to do what I attempted to do last week. We're going to attempt not to have time restraints on what appears to be our little more civil, congenial panelists. And we are going to attempt to not have you write down questions and have you raise your hand and be called on. I will say, I'm sorry, we need to move on if your question becomes a lecture. And I apologize for those of you who want to state their case, but the purpose of today is to have our experts state their case. But we're going to try to have this be a robust, respectful conversation. That's really what we want to model. I would like to start with the first question, if I may. And that is, where does fear come into play on your particular issue? Sometimes based in fact, and sometimes based on what the other side says are facts, that you find yourself in your position going around and saying, but that's not true, that's not accurate, but that's not how it is, that's not really what it is. And because we're finding with social media, the internet, everyone seems to have their own set of facts. And how does this young audience, who really, thank you for your time, because most of them are not voters yet, how are they supposed to know what's real if in some point today you both sit here and have the exact opposite claims and one of them has to be right? And I'm just gonna...
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for having us. Jonathan and I actually do this quite a bit, so it will not be as hard as it was last week. We like each other, and so...
We're actually friends, we have lunch, and we agree on a lot of stuff.
Right, we do try to work together, but we disagree on plenty, so don't worry, there'll be some fireworks. First of all, I'm really happy to come talk to kids. You guys will be voters, you could be candidates, you should be, you can talk to your family and friends, and I think it's really important because I have two kids, 16 and 13, and they'll come home and say, so-and-so said Hillary blah, 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 or Trump blah, blah, blah. You can't just listen to what Jonathan and I say or your friends say. You have to do some research and read about it, and that's hard, right? Our media is polarized. People only read what they want to have reinforced, so it makes being, I think, a citizen hard, but it's worth it, right? That's one of we have a few rights, and we have many rights as citizens and a few duties, and one is to vote, serve on a jury, pay your taxes, run for office, but voting especially. I mean, I vote every election, I vote primaries for judges, I'm sure Jonathan does, so you have to do the hard work to inform yourselves. I think that Norman's first question about fear is a great one. There is a lot of fear and anger and emotion in our issue about gun violence, about can we and how should we regulate gun ownership and access to firearms, what is going to happen if a particular person is elected, is somebody going to take everybody's guns away? Here's what I think to be true, and I actually think Jonathan will agree with some of it, and tell me what you disagree with. So, in our Constitution, the Second Amendment talks about the right to bear arms. Until 2008, the general interpretation by the courts was this has to do with a militia. But many people disagreed with that and thought there was an individual right, and people did have firearms in their home for self-defense, for protection, for hunting, for shooting. People possessed guns before 2008 in their homes and carried them around. Some states and cities were more restrictive than others. In 2008, the United States Supreme Court, Justice Scalia, said there's an individual right in the Second Amendment to possess a handgun in the home for self-defense, and like our other rights, it's not absolute. It can be regulated in certain ways. Perhaps there's some people who can't have firearms, who forfeited their right to firearms. Perhaps there's some places you can't have them. Perhaps there's some kinds of firearms that not everybody can have. those parameters of what's absolute and what's not is kind of the battles we're having now in the state legislatures and Congress, in the courts. There are about 300 million guns in this country. That would be enough, one for every man, woman, and child. They're possessed somewhere probably between 30 and 40% of households. You know, we don't know accurately. There is not a list of who has those guns and what they have in this country. There are certain states that do have license and registration. We're not one of them. Pennsylvania has a sales database of handgun sales. But what I can tell you for sure, and I think Jonathan will agree, is despite what anybody says, nobody is confiscating guns in America. Nobody is taking away all guns. We're never going to have a ban on individual ownership, and we're not going to have a massive gun buyback of all the guns in this country. So there will always be guns, and with the easy access that we have to guns, there will always be gun crime and gun violence. My job is how do we limit illegal gun use, illegal gun possession, how do we limit gun tragedies, access to by people who shouldn't have them. That's what I'm working on, but I think that happens to be true. And I think there are people who say, and who said in 2008 and 2012, Barack Obama is going to take your guns away, and who are saying now Hillary Clinton is going to take your guns away. And the effect of that is that gun sales are going through the roof. Permit applications, license to carry applications are going through the roof. Those are facts. And I think a lot of that is based on fear, because the truth is, we're not going to repeal the Second Amendment. We're not going to take everybody's guns away.
So we've covered a lot of ground just in the first few minutes. Let me react to a few things. So the first question was about fear, right? Is fear what's moving people around? Like you, I'm Jewish. My view is that the antidote to fear is Shabbos. Why? You guys live in a country that is more prosperous than our grandparents and great-grandparents could have dreamed of when they got on boats in Europe. I'm assuming there's not a lot of Sephardic Jews or Mizrahi Jews, like Ashkenazi Jews. Got on boats in Europe and came over here, right? We are richer, we are healthier, we are living longer, we live with so much prosperity, it's hard to even describe. I was listening to a group of girls, my daughter is about your age. We were taken to a bat mitzvah party last night, and they were writing stories, speeches they were going to give. You've been so amazing, you've stood by me through thick and thin, and my wife and I joked afterward, thick and thin? The most horrible thing that's happened to this group of girls is that J. Crew didn't have the dress in the size they wanted, and they had to order it from another store. You know, I mean, the prosperity is just outrageous. But it can be very difficult for you guys to see that. Why? Because you've grown up in this milieu. All you have is your own experience. Taking Shabbos, shutting off the phones, shutting off the social media, leads to quiet. And quiet is the antidote to fear. Why is quiet the antidote to fear? Because you get to think. You get to sit with your feelings. You get to sit with your thoughts. If you come to synagogue, you get to hear a parsha. And maybe, just maybe, start to form up a worldview that is in some sense not informed by instantaneous satisfaction delivered by a device in your hand. So that's the question of fear. How do we deal with fear? Fear, the antidote is silence. And I would encourage you all to take advantage of the gift that we've all been given with Shabbos and get some quiet and begin to form your own opinions. Let's set that aside. In terms of the issues that Shira raised, so this drum beating about they're going to take the guns away, I think what that really winds up being, from the folks that are more on my side of this issue politically than on Shira's side, it winds up being shorthand for living in a world of greater restrictions. What does that mean? In Pennsylvania, we live in a state where we have fairly robust rights as firearms owners. There are no lists of firearms we can't possess other than firearms that are what are called fully automatic, one trigger pull, multiple bullets, machine guns, right? Those are illegal under federal law, and in fact the Supreme Court has said they're outside the Second Amendment. Civilians don't have a right to own them. But other than those, there's no list of guns you can own here. You can get a permit to carry a firearm concealed after you receive a background check. You can, under certain circumstances, openly carry a firearm. You can sling a rifle over your shoulder and walk down the street with it under certain terms and conditions, right? So we have a very robust set of rights as gun owners. Contrast that, for example, with New Jersey, where you cannot get a concealed carry permit. There are fewer than 1,000 of them in the whole state of New Jersey, and you have to be politically connected to get one. There is no open carry. Transporting a gun other than for very, very limited purposes, like you're on your way to hunt and on your way back. Don't stop for gas, don't stop to go to the bathroom, don't stop to get a meal, you're going to get arrested. So it's a very, very restrictive regime in New Jersey. What people that live in places like Pennsylvania fear is that without a Second Amendment supported by Supreme Court ruling that animates it, that breathes life into it, that puts a floor under it, other states could become more like New Jersey and California, where the right, though it exists, is very much restricted. And that's sort of what we fear. So when you hear people say they're going to take away your guns, I agree. I'm not taking away guns, though there are states like California and cities like New York that have done gun confiscation in our lifetime. I mean, it's happened, right? Where they've said, this gun is legal, just register it. All we need to do is register it. Next administration comes in and says, now we've got this list of people who've got these, and we want them banned. Get them out of the jurisdiction or we'll come confiscate them. So those are the kinds of things we fear from my side of this argument when we talk about the Second Amendment being eroded. Other question?
We have a question.
I got a question. So while I love that the antidote to fear is Shabbos, and certainly the antidote to fear is being observant and having a belief in God, right? Because if it's all in God's hands, then there is no fear. But I don't know that that's realistic for the majority, certainly of the people in this room, or even the majority of conservative and reform movement Jews. So how do you balance that? You know, for someone who is observant, that makes perfect sense. But for the rest of the world, who, especially the Jewish world, and certainly the non-Jewish world, when we see conservative movement shrinking and becoming more reformed and moving further away from Shabbos, how do you?
I mean, can I?
Go ahead, please.
So, I mean, I think, and John can speak for himself, I think it's a metaphor, right? You know, you can have Shabbos and not be Jewish. You can listen, you can have peace, you can take some time away, you can make sure there's room for conversation. I mean, I think the antidote is listening and trying to build bridges. Like, what Jonathan are doing and I are doing is not easy. There's not like a whole club of us who get together on both sides. It's usually much more, probably worse than you had last week. You know, I do have armed people come to my events and people are scared, right? But when I can find gun owners that we can talk to and work with, like that's the path to success. Because we're not going to do what we want on our own. We can't achieve it all on our own. And Jonathan's side, we block them. So they get probably more of what they want, you know, right now. But they're scared right now of what the federal government may look like, of what may happen. They can't do everything they want themselves either. They're concerned. But I think that the antidote is conversation, is listening, is trying to read more, is information and knowledge.
Let me go to your point as well. First of all, what Shira and I are doing here, I don't want to say is unique nationally, but it's super unusual. I don't think there's 5 couples like us that are so far apart in terms of the jobs we hold that are having this kind of a civil dialogue with any kind of regularity.
I think that's true.
I can't really even name another one. I'm sure they're out there. So it's pretty rare, but it's informed by...
But it's probably also a lot because we're both Jewish, we know some of the same people, we got thrown into a situation and we've recommended each other.
We have, and also the other thing though, it begins with the humanity that both of us display, which is Shira really is respectful of me. She really appreciates that I'm a person and that there are valid concerns that people on my side have. Likewise, I don't just run her over, and I'm concerned with the fact that she's a person, and we really do sit and listen. And that's really what I want to talk to you guys about. One of the greatest things that you can do as a person is extend yourself on behalf of another person by getting quiet and really listening to them. When you're all eventually in marriage therapy, like the rest of us have been, you will get exercises that they teach you. One of them is the listening pencil, right? Early in a marriage, you wind up hollering at each other a lot, just, you know, sort of negotiating all this, who's going to take out the trash and why is it your responsibility and I love you, I hate you, and, you know, all this sort of stuff that you're sort of building relationships with other people, right? One of the things that they teach you is take a pencil and hand it to the other person. And when whoever has the pencil is the person who's talking, and the other person has to listen. And before you can get the pencil back, you have to be able to repeat back to the other person what they said. And it has to be accurate. And try that as an exercise with your friends if you ever disagree. Right? Only one person is talking, the other person is listening, and in order to get the right to speak, you have to have listened well enough to know what the other person said, really know it and be able to repeat it back and articulate it. And that's some of what we've done, without the pencil. That's some of what we've done, is I've really listened and sort of tried to understand, like, what's at issue? What is it that you're trying to achieve? She's listening to me. What is it that's at issue? What are you really trying to achieve? And it is that listening, that extending yourself on behalf of another person, that is, first of all, in my view, an act of love. And second of all, is the only thing that's going to let us progress. Otherwise, the world is reduced to a world of violence, whether physical or political, where it's just counting heads and saying, I've got more than you, so screw you, and I'm going to just run you over. And ultimately, that's a problem. Ultimately, that leads to a polity that's at odds and that's at each other, where people are fighting and not listening, and it leads to a breakdown in civil society.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke at Barrack earlier this year on their Politicon Day. And originally it was just me, and a teacher felt that it was necessary to have balance, so I recommend Jonathan was back. And there was somebody, we got into a conversation about something, and somebody, you know, we may talk about it a little bit, I know about magazine capacity, and this person said, I don't want to be limited in my magazine capacity because I'm not that good at changing my magazines, and there might not be enough shots. And I said, and Jonathan was behind me, I said, if you have a gun in your home, which is your right, you need to know how to use it, store it, clean it, change the magazine, and shoot to kill if that's why you have it. And your inability to do it, shoot to stop, fine. Inability to do it is not going to change my view. Now, Jonathan could have taken the view and just said, no magazine capacity limits, they're totally crazy, I disagree with them. He kind of nodded and agreed that I was right, that this person's view didn't make a whole lot of sense, like wasn't a rational argument. Now, on the other hand, we totally disagreed about something else, and I told him if he said it again, I wouldn't do it with him here today. But we can talk like that to each other.
Right. And actually, she heard me out when I said, I meant something else, I said it with these words, and it came out wrong. I'm going to correct that when we talk about it again. We have a civil dialogue. But, you know, to the point of listening, right? Guns are super foreign to you guys. Why do I know that? Because you're Jews, right? And we know demographically, Jews don't hunt much. I do. You probably don't, right? A lot of Jews live in urban environments or suburban environments where gun ownership is lower than it is maybe in rural, although you'd be shocked to know what the gun ownership rates are in urban environments and who the average NRA member is. That's something we can talk about later. But what it means is for you to understand the arguments that I'm going to lay out about why people have guns is going to require you to extend yourself beyond your own experience. And that may also be true, men, when the topic of abortion comes up. It's going to be a different topic for you because it's not your body you're talking about. There are other topics like it where over the rest of your life, you're going to have to extend yourself and try and get into a frame of reference that's not your own. And that's going to require listening and quiet.
Can I just ask a foundation question that
Sure.
I don't want to assume, I'm trying to think like a teenager, which is surprisingly easy for me. I can't imagine any of my students are shocked to hear that. What does Ceasefire PA want? So like, what is the organization? And I'm only asking, Jonathan, I'm only asking Shira because there's an organization name there as opposed to.
But you know, you should also, I'll answer the same
Okay,
question.
and if you have, I don't know if I'm asking you on behalf of the NRA in this case, or whatever the
I can speak to what NRA is.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
but
have-
I'd like to just
Okay.
set the foundation.
So, our mission statement is that we want to reduce gun violence and gun tragedies, stop the flow of illegal guns into our streets, and keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. So, we are an education and advocacy organization, mostly advocating in Harrisburg for different laws in Pennsylvania, but sometimes at the national level with our congressional delegation. The big things that we're working for right now is for background checks for every gun sale. Now you might say, doesn't every gun have a background check? No. If you go to your Cabela's and you want to buy a gun, so that's a licensed gun dealer, or your John's gun shop, depending where you live, and you go in, yes, you're going to do a background check on whatever you buy. If Jonathan decides he doesn't want his handgun and he's going to sell it to me, we are also going to go to one of those licensed dealers and get a background check. Now, if I decide I want to buy Jonathan's shotgun, he's upgrading, getting a new model, or a long gun is measured by the length of the barrel. This could be one of the AR-15s that you've seen that are often used in the mass shootings. Jonathan can sell it to me right now. He doesn't have to do a background check. As long as he doesn't know that I'm a prohibited person, that I have a felony conviction or something very serious in my mental health history or an active protection from abuse order, he can sell it to me. Now, how would he know those things without doing a background check? I'm not sure. That's one of the loopholes we want to close. In Pennsylvania, we don't have a gun show loophole. Jonathan has taken me to a gun show. That's not what the issue is here. It's about the private sale of long guns. That could happen at a gun show. It doesn't happen that much, I think. It happens with somebody you meet on the internet and meet in private. It could happen over your neighbor's back fence, at a yard sale, those kinds of things. That's a loophole. We'd like people to be required to report if their guns are lost or stolen, because most crime guns start out as legally purchased guns not far from when they end up as a crime gun. Somebody's cousin knew that somebody's uncle had one in the garage and they stole it. Or maybe your gun got stolen and it wasn't reported. This is a way to find out people who are illegally transferring guns, straw purchasing, using their clean record to buy for other people. We would like to see some stricter regulation about the semi-automatic rifles, semi-automatic weapons, and high-capacity magazines, whether those are bans or we're talking about a different kind of licensing or maybe limits on what you can purchase. I think that's a tough issue that will be solved at some point at the federal level, probably not at the Pennsylvania level. And we'd like to do something, and I talked to Jonathan about this, to deal with the mental health issue. And just briefly, I want to say that most people who are mentally ill are much more likely to become victims of violence and to perpetrate violence. And our system right now, it is over and under inclusive. So you can't buy a gun if you have been involuntarily committed to a mental institution in Pennsylvania for more than 72 hours, or if a judge has declared you incompetent.
For the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life. So that is going to capture people who will never become a danger to themselves or others. And it will not capture people who are dangerous. So the question is, how do we get those people who are in imminent crisis, who have never been in the mental health system but could be dangerous to themselves or others? And what do we do with those people who were in some kind of crisis, got the treatment they needed or not, and now are under a permanent disability? Jonathan and I have had a lot of conversations and would like to find a way to do this, but people who, what's the word I'm looking for? Imminent. Impulsive suicide. Impulsive suicide and impulsive homicide are real things. Sometimes people buy the gun the same day that they kill themselves. What could we do about that? Is there a way to get somebody who's in crisis to be able to be temporarily banned from getting a gun? Those are the kinds of things my organization is working on.
So Shira hits it right when she says mental health is probably the hardest thing we deal with, and we've just simply got to get that right. We've just got to get it right. And it's really difficult. And we've been working on it and talking about it. She is right, it's over and under conclusive. Probably the area where we're probably putting a lot of our effort together. In terms of what NRA does, we do a lot of the same stuff Shira does. We just have different views on how to get it done. Keeping guns out of the wrong hands, right? Mental health and guns. We're doing that stuff. The background check system that we have today in America exists because NRA advocated. Right? We assented to and argued in favor of and put money and effort behind getting a background check system. Why? Because it doesn't help us a bit if people who ought not to have guns get access to those guns and do stupid things with them, right? It doesn't help us at all. But in terms of who NRA is, let me just give you some level setting. NRA is the leading civil rights organization in the United States right now. What do I mean by that? We have almost 6 million paid members. 6 million paid members, and I've seen the data. 6 million paid members. Just to give you a sense, ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, has 500,000 paid members. The Episcopal Church in America has 1.8 million paid members. And in 2013, Shira's group had 766 paid members.
So he knows that I don't have membership, we don't charge dues, and he said this before, and we don't have any paid membership. We had donors.
766.
And tens of thousands of other people who would be counted as supporters.
Fine, but all I'm telling you is, in the last year, NRA's popularity has pulled higher than Barack Obama, both houses of Congress, every major presidential candidate, and both political parties. So 70% of Americans, when they're polled about what we view as our core objectives, agree with the statement that Americans should be able to keep a firearm fully assembled and loaded in their home for self-defense purposes. So we are about as mainstream as it gets as an American organization. Now, in this geography, in the Jewish community, does that seem like that's crazy talk? Yeah, it probably does. But across America, across Pennsylvania, we are about as mainstream as it gets. So when you talk about what are we after, we're trying to make sure that Americans' historic right to own and possess firearms for hunting, for self-defense, for militia as an anti-tyranny device is not eviscerated. That's a really important part of what we do. In the context of that, we spend millions of dollars a year. We spend more money on training people how to use guns. Boy Scouts, hunters, children. We have sent a program called Eddie Eagle into schools 26,000 times. We've contacted over 26 million children with one message. The Eddie Eagle program has one message. Stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell an adult. That's it. It's not NRA branded. It's not here, have a gun, kid. It's stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell an adult. So you go out on any weekend in America, somewhere in this state, right now, one of our 100,000 NRA certified instructors is teaching a troop of Boy Scouts, a group of new hunters, how to handle a gun safely, how to store it safely, how to load it and unload it safely. We're the only group doing it, right? A lot of what I'll call anti-gun groups, and it's not within their remit, it's not part of their mission. They're not doing this. They're not out spending weekends teaching this kind of stuff. We are. So a lot of what we do is to make sure that people are using these devices, and they're going to be omnipresent, they're not going away, that they're being used safely.
Well, except that, first of all, the training that the NRA does that you can buy at a gun store, I would do it. I would make it mandatory, even if that money went to the NRA. But they don't. They won't make it mandatory. You can go to a gun store and say, I've never fired a gun before, and they'll be like, great, would you like to buy one today? How do I learn how to use it? I can also sell you a class, but you can leave with the gun right now.
Correct.
So, and if I ask Jonathan to do a bill with me to make training mandatory, my guess is he's going to say no. It shouldn't be mandatory because it's a constitutional right. Number two, the Eddie Eagle program, it does not work. There have been multiple studies that show that the kids will sing the Eddie Eagle song while picking up the gun that's left for them in the test. It doesn't work. So as far as their child safety, Eddie Eagle, we're totally against that. We think it is an NRA branded thing, and it doesn't work. Their adult training, I agree with, and yes, it's not in my mission. We're not anti-gun, but why should somebody take gun safety lessons from me? I'm not a gun owner. That should be part of their mission.
So two things. First of all, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other ones, right? Our gun training program, safety program, is the worst one except for all the other ones, right? We're doing it. The data she points to, there have been, famous ABC did a thing where anyway, it's the best program out there that we've got, right?
Except we could have mandatory safe storage,
so
locks,
let's
child
talk
access
about
prevention laws, they work.
Let's talk about why I don't believe in mandatory training. I think that to mandate that somebody get training before they can exercise a right is highly problematic. Let me give you an example. Imagine if before you could go in and vote, you had to demonstrate that you had a basic working knowledge of American constitutional jurisprudence. Right? There was a time in America where things like that existed. They were called poll taxes, and they're illegal. When you have a core right, and the Second Amendment is a core right, you can't burden it before it is exercised. Right? That's axiomatic in our Supreme Court's jurisprudence. So, if you can't burden it by saying you must, could you change the incentives around it, maybe? Perhaps, and we've talked about that. Maybe people that get training get broader privileges. Maybe people who don't get training get lesser privileges. Maybe, I'm not committing to that. But what I'm saying is there are ways to change behavior without slamming people and saying you must, you have to, you must, you have to, or you're going to jail.
But we do make people register to vote.
Sure.
You have to sign up within a certain amount of time. That is a burden. So there are some rights that have a pre-existing burden before you can exercise them.
True. One of the things that animates my community is that many of the solutions that people have for issues around guns involve criminalizing our behavior. Okay? I often joke when I'm talking to gun-friendly audiences. Every mistake in our world is a felony. Okay? And when every mistake is a felony, what it means is every mistake is existential with regard to your gun rights. Because if you're a felon, you can't own a gun, possess a gun, and you can't really get that right back in a meaningful way. So one of the things that we have to focus on is if we want gun owners to behave in a particular way, we have to find a graduated way of expressing to those gun owners that the behavior they've exhibited is outside what we expect. And then there has to be a path back. And that path back cannot be an onerous, lawyer and expert-laden, multi-$1,000 path back. To get your gun rights back when you've been 302, right, when you've been taken in for an involuntary mental examination in Pennsylvania, requires thousands of dollars of experts, thousands of dollars worth of legal fees. It's unfair. The right gets taken away like that, and to get it back takes thousands. If I get 50 calls to my office in a month about getting my rights restored from a 302, an involuntary commitment, one of those people might be able to afford the $2,500 fee that we charge to start that process. So when we talk about disciplining and shaping the behavior of gun owners, one of the things that's really important is to make sure we have graduated, escalating punishments and a way back. There's a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and then you're on. Please feel free, while they're talking, to raise your hand. They will acknowledge that you have a question, and maybe, you know, they'll cut what they're saying a little shorter so you can answer your question. So I don't want you to think you have to wait.
Just get some water.
Are you streaming live like on Facebook?
Are you streaming live?
Just recording for
He's
my.
Oh, okay. So I would
He's
like
recording
follow
or
you.
streaming?
I didn't say just
Oh wait, I'll stream it live.
Oh, all right.
Do you want to stream it?
okay.
Stream it? People
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of in the middle now, but.
It is being streamed now. It's now being
okay.
streamed.
Questions for Jonathan, so we'll have this.
Can I ask a question in the meantime?
He is so talented that he can get a couple water and take a question.
Jonathan, my question is that while I understand here that gun ownership is not mainstream for Jews, I live in Alabama. It's very mainstream for everybody. I venture to say that gun ownership among Jews is lower, but we are a right to carry it. We have to have a concealed permit. It's Jewish people in other areas. So Shabbos, it's a multi-pronged thing. Shabbos might be the antidote to fear. It's also the antidote to irrational action, that stop, think process before you do something. So training to be able to stop, think process is very important in gun ownership, in my responsibility to urge the public, and those educational programs are not part of the NRA's.
So they actually are. We spend more money every year doing that. We run a civilian marksmanship program where we take people out and teach them how to shoot. We run concealed carry classes. We run, I mean, if you go up and
In the South, where gun ownership is a huge issue.
so they're promoted everywhere. Go up on the internet, go to a website called nrainstructors.org, and you can search by zip code and find training classes every day of the week all over this Commonwealth.
Right, but you're gonna pay for them and they're voluntary. They're not required to get your gun.
But you have to go looking for them.
Yeah.
So that is a certain type of person. I know a woman who got a gun as a Valentine's Day present. It's really cute. It's a pink Smith & Wesson. She doesn't know how to use it. I said, well, what are you going to do? She said, well, I have it just in case. She's not the person who's going to go to the website to learn how to use it. Why is there not a prominent push?
They're
Huge.
Come with me to a gun store and you will see that when you go to buy a gun, they are talking to you about training. This is something we talk about all the time to the point where we're blue in the face. I can't beat a person to buy ammunition to do it. So my answer is no. I don't think it serves any purpose.
So I think that we have a problem. So if you look at the Aurora shooter, the guy who went to the Batman movie, he bought thousands and thousands of rounds.
Passed
of
a background
ammunition.
check.
Not for his ammunition.
But for his gun, he passed a
For
background
his
check.
gun he did, but online, thousands and thousands in a short period of time. In this state and many others, if you buy too much Sudafed, which is a decongestant, in a couple weeks, they take your license, they check, they do all that. Yes, I think there should be limits, or I think there should be flags, or I think there should be something that says this person is buying a lot of ammunition they've never bought before. You know, what could be going on? I agree that, you know, for the sportsman who wants to go to the range and shoot thousands, I'm not worried about him, and either are you. But you are worried about this guy who's sitting alone in his basement plotting something and can get, I mean, I think you should be. So I think we could put in some, look, the country and the way we buy stuff is totally different from when it was in 1994 when we started with the background check and we started with an assault weapons ban. It's totally different.
Raise your hand
We
at
buy
the
stuff
next.
on the internet, we have it in a second. They track everything we do. I mean, it's completely possible. And there's ways to balance those rights with those responsibilities, like you said. I think we could do it.
Sir,
Oh, yeah. I could be wrong, in which case, I'm sorry that I started the question this way, but I read somewhere that we're the only country that, that has a right to bear arms, that even countries where gun ownership is fairly high, they don't have that right. So I was just curious as to how you guys, or maybe the organizations that you work with,
Your subscriptions down, right? Nobody's quarter soldiers in your house, right? And you can't be stopped on the street and frisked for no reason, right? The police have to have probable cause, though that bar has been set lower and lower and lower and lower over the years, right? So my view is that we have our Second Amendment, we have our First Amendment, we have our whole Bill of Rights, and that it's suitable for us as a people. And if other people want to do other things, God bless them.
So, yes, we're the only country that has a Second Amendment like that. We also are the only developed nation that has the level of gun deaths every year that we have. We have the same level of mental illness as most other developed nations. We have the same movies, video games, same crime levels generally. So the issue is our easy access to firearms. Now, I don't usually bring up other countries too, because we're in America and this is what we're dealing with. I don't believe, just as a general rule, that our Constitution is God-given and our rights are God-given. I believe we are a government that was created by men, and now men and women, and we have the Second Amendment. It's not going away. The question is, and I think, I'm not one who quotes Justice Scalia a whole lot, but it's not absolute. It's like our other rights. If we cannot decide here at Har Zion today, and with that at Israel, and who else is here, Beth?
David,
We're starting a new part of Judaism, and we're bringing back child sacrifice. Like, that's not protected by the First Amendment. There are things we can't do. I can't start just saying lies about Jonathan and publishing them in the Jewish Exponent. I can't do it knowing we do that. So that's also a limit on First Amendment. I have a Fourth Amendment right to be free from illegal search and seizure, but the police have a lot of rights to come in and search me if they have probable cause, there's an emergency circumstances, things like that. We have a whole balance of rights and responsibilities, of regulations, of those things. And I think that despite what he says and what the NRA says, they believe the Second Amendment is special and different. They think it is absolute, and that you can't have any requirements. That's why even though the NRA agreed to a background check system years ago, they don't want to expand it at all. And I think some of them, not necessarily the NRA, but some gun owners would get rid of background checks if they could.
My question is, the shooter.
Because they have a suspicion that you might be involved in terrorist activities. You know how you get off the terrorist watch list? Trick question. You don't, right? You really don't. You have people who have tried to find out if they're on it. You have people who've tried to find out how to get off of it, and it's a near impossibility. One of the requirements that we have in the United States is that people cannot be deprived of rights without due process of law, right? I can't say, you can't vote without giving you a hearing, accusing you of a crime, seeing you convicted in a court of law, giving you the opportunity to call and present evidence, to confront your accuser, to do all of the things that we think of as fair, right? We broadly call that due process of law. If somebody can get onto that list without any kind of a formal process and without having a mechanism to challenge the fact that they're on it, figure out what evidence put them on it, figure out what testimony put them on it, and then figure out how to get off of it, and have that get off of it discussion in front of a neutral magistrate, right, an Article 3 judge who isn't invested in the agency that put him on the list. If all those things are not present, then that process, that list, is invalid for purposes of limiting a constitutional right.
So here's what I would say to that. If there's problems with the list, and I'll agree that there are, fix the list. But we actually have a list, and there are these people who can't get on planes. Jonathan doesn't care that they can't get on a plane.